Hello and welcome to another TFHB REACT. Now we're going back to another Tifo Football video, so please subscribe to them. And we're going to look at one of the greatest footballers of our lifetime, early footballing memories, which is Ronaldo, or R9 as he's now known. What a player he was. Yeah. We ranked him recently in our rating of the best players of the 21st century. We had him in the top 10, but we felt like a lot of his best days were maybe in the 1990s, and hopefully this video is going to let us know just why he was so good and why he's so revered. It's called Why Original Ronaldo is So Hard to Compare. Yeah. Which was our problem the other day.
Well, exactly that. Yeah, it was, and he straddles those two decades, the 90s and the noughties. A fantastic footballer, a fantastic number 9. But isn't considered along the lines of Cristiano, who starts the video there, or a Messi, and let's see what they've got to say about him.
Okay.
To many, Ronaldo is one of the greatest footballers of all time. No, not Cristiano Ronaldo, but the original Brazilian Ronaldo, o Fenomeno. Neither before nor since has another player managed to replicate what Ronaldo was.
So there's 4 players behind him there. Most people would argue are the GOATs of football. Yeah. Messi, Maradona, Pele, and Cristiano Ronaldo. Definitely those first 3 are on that other level. But I think this Ronaldo, a lot of people have him in their top 10s.
Yeah.
Where would you have him?
Yeah, I think he probably is, but you're right in that we saw the tail end of his career. So our first World Cup 2002, I remember him and distinctive, and obviously the haircut and everything like that. But he was so good and scored the goals in the final and things like that. So he's etched into my memory in that way. But I don't remember him domestically because
we didn't
have the chance to watch him domestically, and so sometimes he's maybe a little bit underrated perhaps in our heads. So yeah.
An anomaly. But for some reason, he doesn't really feature within the greatest of all time conversation, which is dominated by Maradona, Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Pele. But why is that? Why is it so hard to understand how good he really was?
Let's go.
An obvious point to start with. Ronaldo's career didn't run parallel to any of the other players in that conversation. Pele and Maradona dominated earlier eras. Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo arrived later, after Ronaldo's prime.
So Ronaldo's era, the 1990s mainly, and that turn of the millennium, isn't it, really? Yeah. I mean, you think of other great players from that time, like Zinedine Zidane.
Yeah.
Striker-wise, you had players like Batistuta for Argentina in Serie A. I mean, Serie A was the league, and Ronaldo was obviously in there for a while. Romario, another great Brazilian player, another one who's kind of forgotten. Then you got the Premier League players like Shearer and that line, Cole, York, and all those great forwards as well. But I think, generally speaking, other than maybe I'd say Zidane, no one else in that era pushes the greatest all-time debate.
No, and I think
Maldini.
It's so important in football sense to have that competing. Well, in all sports really, you're thinking about in tennis and the Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic and things like that. Having those big names competing against each other, and as we're saying here, that Ronaldo didn't overlap with, like we had the Maradona, Pele, like we had clearly the Messi, Ronaldo. Perhaps he's a little bit forgotten in the middle there.
Yeah,
had long gone. Side-by-side comparisons are not possible, and his abilities cannot be properly contextualized. Another problem is more abstract and arises from how unusual he was as a player. Much of his appeal lay in his uniqueness, and how for many, what he did on the pitch was new. When his reputation began to grow in Europe, first with PSV and then later at Barcelona and beyond, his playing style compromised elements that many had never seen before in a single footballer. Ronaldo was physically imposing, very broad-shouldered, but he was also extremely quick, very agile and highly skillful in a way that few others were, and which seemed to defy his body type.
So, got to pause it there before he comes on the screen with his 2002 haircut. But that's a really good point there. So he didn't fit the mould of a footballer around that time.
Yeah.
Physically imposed. You think of the English forwards at that time. They were usually like the classic number 9s, quite physically imposing, but they weren't quick.
Yeah.
They weren't speed merchants. They were did target men, poachers.
They weren't skillful.
They weren't skillful, and he had all these things. And I think that was his amazing thing, was that blistering pace he had at first was like frightening for defenders. They're like, oh my gosh! Like, you'd often have it on the wings. You'd expect it with those wingers, but not necessarily with the centre forward. And obviously, he's got it all. So that must have shocked the football all the time. And his goal record then for PSV and then Barcelona was stupid.
Yeah.
He was a prolific goalscorer, yes, but he was also a spectacle, a unicorn long before such terminology existed. A classic example is Barcelona manager Bobby Robson's famous disbelieving reaction to Ronaldo's wonder goal against Compostela in 1995. It was the response of someone who'd just seen something new and had watched the parameters of what he thought was possible being redrawn. But how can that be quantified and explained to a modern audience? Ronaldo can never be put back in that particular moment in time, before the game had evolved with the aid of greater commercialization, more advanced training techniques and superior preparation.
I guess that's another point. You mentioned there, haven't you, about we didn't get to see it much of him play because we didn't have, social media wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
Internet, was dial-up modem, so you wouldn't get much of it. And if you did get a video, it would be some, terrible grainy one.
It's not instant Twitter goals or whatever we got now from across the world, isn't it? Where you can see, if everything as it happens, and that just simply wasn't the case.
You could watch it on the weekend on the Serie A program, but it probably wasn't. But when that was on, it was probably a little before us as well, wasn't it? But yeah, interesting. Obviously, if he was playing now, I know he had the boots in the end. Those special ones made for the '98 World Cup. But I think if he was playing now, he'd be having the same massive output as Ronaldo and Messi.
Instead, his impact is more anecdotal. His career ended well before the analytics boom, so his contribution can't even be described with anything more detailed than the most basic statistics. It leaves him dependent upon witness statements from those who watched him live, even if that does prove highly compelling testimony. Ronaldinho described him as his hero growing up. So did Lionel Messi, saying that he was the best striker I've ever seen. He was so fast he could score from nothing and could shoot the ball better than anyone.
Praise.
Thierry Henry said that Ronaldo did things nobody had seen before. Clarence Seedorf called him the best player I've ever seen in my career, and perhaps the most pertinent point was made by Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who remarked that there was nobody like him. No one has influenced both football and the players who emerged as Ronaldo.
I mean, for him to say that, he's got to be good because he's used to talk about himself and he talks like that, isn't he? That massive praise from those players.
Oh no, Ronaldinho's name, isn't it? Means little Ronaldo. He took his name on the back of Ronaldo, and I think it's phrases like that from people who are at the top of the game, Henry and Messi and Ibrahimovic. It shows just how good he was, and perhaps how he is underappreciated.
But where did it all go wrong?
And influence is important to Ronaldo's legacy. He inspired a whole generation of players, becoming one of the first elite goal scorers to play from deep, and among just a few who could contribute to a very high standard outside of the box. In his own era, his goal tallies were broadly comparable to players like Alan Shearer, Patrick Kluivert, and Gabriel Batistuta, and predecessors such as Hristo Stoichkov and Romario.
Well, we named a few
and yet
of those,
very obviously he had greater dimensions as a player. Ronaldo also spawned imitators. Hundreds of future players would mimic his traits. His success redrew the boundaries of his own position, destroying the expectation that a forward belonged solely in the box, or that they shouldn't try to beat the defenders 40 or 50 yards from goal. Now, he was not the first player to do those things, but arguably he was the first to exhibit those abilities all at the same time, and so consistently. And crucially, he did so at a time when football from different leagues was beginning to be broadcast across the world, far more regularly, allowing his influence to stretch even further. So timing was very important for Ronaldo. But then so, strangely, was his misfortune. Ronaldo moved to PSV when he was 18. In the 4 seasons after his arrival, encompassing spells at Barcelona and Inter Milan, he was prolific everywhere he went. Regardless of the league and irrespective of its defensive standards, he scored goals in great number. But in 1999, he suffered the first of 2 serious knee injuries in consecutive seasons, costing him almost 2 whole years of his career during his mid-20s prime.
You see the pain on his face there.
Yeah.
It's bad. I think I've read since, I think the physio did an interview 442, I think, a few years ago, and he said it was the worst injury he'd ever seen. And it was like his knee literally exploded, basically. Yeah. It was just like...
Well, I mean, you look at the timeline there, and so he ruptures his knee tendon, terrible, can be a career ender for many players. He plays 6 minutes and then suffers a complete rupture of his knee tendon. I mean, horrendous.
And there's a good 6 months or 5 months between those 2 games as well. So he's had 5 months out, or whatever, and he's coming back, and it's just
awful.
Agony.
Now, like any great player who suffers injury young, there is a sense that Ronaldo would have achieved an impossibly high standard during that period. And not unreasonably. He had been FIFA World Player of the Year in 1996 and 1997. He won the Ballon d'Or in 1998 and won the Best Player award at the 1998 World Cup. When that kind of ascension is interrupted by injury, fans' imaginations tend to fill the gaps and garnish the player's legend. Ronaldo returned to win the 2002 World Cup with Brazil and top score in the tournament.
Well, that's our first World Cup, isn't it? And that was huge, and that's an amazing amazing comeback story.
Yeah.
To come back for obviously the '98 World Cup. I don't think they have mentioned here, have they? When you had the fit before the final, when it was Ronaldo's World Cup. It was build up for Ronaldo to be the player who wins the World Cup for Brazil, and he almost deserved it at that tournament. He was so good. And obviously, he has the fit before the final. He's not in the starting lineup. Then he's in it. They go out. He's nowhere in the game. And he gets his awful injury into it, comes back, 8 goals in that World Cup, 2 in the final. He was, and that was amazing to see.
It's a story you don't always get in football. Actually, a comeback story is such a great story in all sorts of sport. And to do that 4 years later and to lift it with Brazil, obviously their last world title as well, is massive, really. So I think.
Because they haven't won it since, have they?
Yeah, he's etched in Brazilian memory for now until they win another one, certainly.
And he was the most goals at the World Cup, wasn't he, for a while?
Once again, he claimed the Ballon d'Or, and that he managed that feat in spite of injuries which might have ended his career is also very seductive. And in some eyes, worth more than whatever he may have won in the period when he was absent.
Yeah, to come
But
back
it's
and
the
win
same
the Ballon d'Or
problem,
as well.
particularly after an era during which Messi and the other Ronaldo
level,
demonstrated their success so literally, with goal records, trophies by the dozens, and unprecedented hold over the game's top individual prizes. What metrics can be used to make Ronaldo's case? His Ballons d'Or worth aren't asterisked or inscribed differently in recognition of what he overcame. They can't be. And yet, because they're not, their literal tonnage doesn't really tell the whole story. But most of all, given the limitations and the nature of what happens in sport when time passes, how good Ronaldo really was is so elusive because it depends upon subjective interpretations of what a great player really is. What's more important, trophies or impact? Longevity or spectacle? Impact versus performance? The importance of a career versus what it meant at the time.
On this 4-hour rating.
And these will always be questions without proper answers.
Great video.
Yeah.
And the animation is superb, isn't
Tifo,
it?
hats off.
It is great. I mean, we tried to replicate a few of those kind of animations ourselves, so check them out. But, amazing. The Tifo Football, I've been doing it for years. Absolutely brilliant. Obviously, part of the Athletic now. But yeah, great video, and what a player, and that whole point at the end, what a great player really is. It is subjective, and obviously we did a rating last time or a couple of videos ago, which had a interesting reaction. But that's it, isn't it? It's a matter of opinion of what you think of great players, and we weren't necessarily going saying just because you win loads of trophies you deserve to be there. I mean, there's plenty of players who've won loads. I just pretty much Aston Villa player, Asensio has won 19 major trophies, but you wouldn't have him in your best players of all time, would you?
Yeah, and I think when you look at Ronaldo, it's that wider legacy of it, isn't it? Yeah, because of course he was hit by injury. Of course he was not perhaps he didn't reach the heights he could have reached, even though they were incredibly high heights, itself. But it's hard when you didn't see him play as much. I think that's what today's generation struggle with, because everyone, even today, 20
quick search your phone, you got a clip, haven't you?
Yeah, 2025. They dismiss anything, sort of even 2010, people like that now you seem to be dismissed. And for decent reasons, because sometimes the game moves on and the game's different. But I think he is a player, we said earlier, that would have moved with the times had he been around now.
Well, he was ahead of his time, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Right, there we go. Let us know in the comments below, where would you rate Ronaldo in terms of the greatest of all time? What's your best memories of the player as well? And if that's everything, we'll see you again for another one very soon.